Hi, and welcome to another PLD session on Python programming. As we continue from the very first session that we had last week, we did a number of the basic stuff. In this week, we are looking at inputs and outputs, type conversion, Boolean operators, and strings. And by the time we are done with this session, all of these things will make sense to you. But for now, let me just take my time to introduce you to these sessions. Anytime you start programming, at least the very first thing that you are interested in learning about is being able to put something on the screen from your program. Okay, and besides, essentially, when you take any program at all, what makes it more relevant is the input and output. What do I mean by input and output? The program should be able to take in some commands from the end user, then it should also be able to output something to the end user. For instance, if you have written a software for me and I need a software to solve a problem for me, I'm looking at me putting whatever my problem is into the software and the software giving me solutions. Okay. So today in our Python programming lesson, we are looking at how do we accept input from our users and how do we display output to our users, and that's exactly what we are going to look at now. So let's start with output, since that will be more, it will be easier. When we print, we want to output something. I've even used the word. It's a simple function that we use called print. You don't need to worry about what function is. We are going to deal with it later. But then it's an English word, a function, action word. Like, yes, I usually call it an action word. It tells your computer to do something. So this one in particular says print. Is a function in Python that we use to display something on your screen. Ideally, when they say print, you may think that to print something on a sheet of paper, but here in Python, when we say print, we're looking at displaying something on your screen. So the first thing that we need to know about is how do we use this print function? Okay, so if you want to output something to your screen, you should use what? Print function. But the first thing you need to know is how do I use the print function to output something onto my screen? So assuming that I want my Python program to tell me or output my name, how do I do that? Let me launch this. Where Python programming. Okay, see Python here. Great. Okay, so I'm trying to open VS Code, then we'll code in VS Code. Okay, and by now you all have all these things installed, as I talked about on the last session. Not VS Code in particular, it could be any other. Let's create the first file here. Say print. The first file is called okay. Print name .py. And by now you should understand why the extension is .py. Okay, we've talked about that in the previous session. And the video is available on YouTube. So if you haven't watched it yet, you can just click on YouTube for it. Why is my system being so slow? What's happening? Wow. Wow. I don't know why the system is being slow, but kindly be patient with me as I. Okay. From what's going on, let me rather come back and use IDON. Today, all the odds are against me today. Yes, we'll do it no matter what. So, okay, good. Let's try with this one. What I said initially was how do we use print? So basically to use print, the common usage you find is having print out string. Okay, and we'll talk about string. Basically, a string is just, I think last week I even mentioned it, it's just a collection of characters put together. Okay, so when we have characters like my name, like OBED. These are individual characters that are put together and they are put in quotation marks. So far as they are in quotation marks, you can consider them as strings. So if I want to display my name on the screen, I can just go ahead and use print like this. Print is a function. In Python, you write functions like this with, so the name of the function with the curly braces, okay? I mean the parentheses, sorry. The parentheses opening and closing that. So what you are seeing here is just print, the parentheses, then we have a string inside. What makes this a string is a collection of characters that are enclosed in quotation marks. We can equally use the single quotation marks, I mean the apostrophe if you want to call it that way. So I can equally do this as well. Then when I hit enter, you remember that there are two modes of running Python programs. We talked about it last week. There's the interactive mode. So when I hit enter, it gives me the output. What did it just do? It printed out OBED onto my screen. And that's exactly what I asked it to do. I asked it to print something onto the screen. So that is what it has done for me. So as I said earlier, I could have also done with using the double quotation marks, then I hit enter. It's going to give me the same result. You could have longer ones, say my full name is this. That is also acceptable. But essentially, all that you are doing is printing something onto your screen. And if this is not a string that you want to print, say you want to print an integer, which we've talked about last week, 2 is an integer. If I go ahead and I print it, it prints 2. Okay, so basically print is just a function that takes whatever it's supposed to print. I would call it an object. We pass, or for now, let me just say a value. Pass a value into print, and depending on what the value is, it's going to print it for you. So I can equally print a float as well. That is a number with a decimal value. So say 4.5. Then close it like that. If I go ahead and do this, I think we should note the difference here. We will soon talk about it. Here it is printing 2, but this 2 is considered a string because we put it in a quotation mark. Here it printed 2, but this 2 is an integer because there is no quotation mark. There is a difference there. So far as you write a number without a quotation mark, we are looking at an integer. As soon as you bring the quotation marks or the apostrophe or however you call those things, then we are looking at a string. Okay, so that is basically how we use the print function. You may ask yourself, where would this be applicable? Well, in almost every program that you are going to write, so far as you are going to display something to the screen of your user, print is going to be used. So there are more complex usage of print that we'll get to soon, but I want you to understand this is like the basics and why we even need to know about print. Whenever you do something, build any form of application, do a calculator. If I build a calculator, say even here, we can do print 2 plus 2. And by now you should know what 2 plus 2 will give us. When you print it, it gives you 4. So inside the program that you write, you can then use print to say that, hey, I want you to print the output of this calculator or calculations that this user wants us to do. So assuming that I've come to build a calculator that asks you to input your numbers that you want to add. after inputting the numbers, I have to display the sum of those numbers to you. How do I display that? I'm going to use the print function. So basically, that is what we do with the print function. Use it to output something. Then last week we talked about variables, using variables to store data of different types. Okay, so I think before I go on, I should talk about the different types of data. All right, so variables are used to store data, but in Python we basically have these types of data. I think there are 4 inbuilt ones. We have strings, we have integers, we have Boolean, then we have floats. Okay, those are the 4 basic data types that you find in Python. Data types. So to store something, a variable is basically a container that will store a data. Okay, so to store a data, the data will be of any of these types. It's either it's a string, an integer, a Boolean, or float. There are a few others which are not like the basic ones, okay, that we may find along the line. But for now, let's stick to this. So if I want something, let's say I want a container for my name, assuming typing my name isn't the easiest thing in the world, or a particular number, say this number 147897782. If you are going to use this number in your program, trying to recall this number and type it out every time isn't going to be the easiest thing to do. For that matter, what do? You can assign this a label. Okay, say x is equal to this number. That is a variable that we have created. And this means that anywhere at all that I write x is actually containing this value. For that matter, I can replace this value anywhere in my program with x. And that is what I'm talking about when I talk about using variables. So here, I can go ahead and say name. Name is the variable. And let me assign a value to the variable. The name is Ehoneah Obed. Okay? So just by doing this, I have stored in the memory of this program, I've stored in its memory a variable called name. And anytime I call name, what does it give me? Ehoneah Obed. Okay? Just by typing name. Because name is just a label or a container that contains a string. What string is it? Ehoneah Obed. So now, if I want to print my name in a program, assuming I've created a program that just prints name.
Can you zoom in? It's difficult for me to see your screen.
Okay. Let me see. It's not working. Quite unfortunate. I've not tried zooming in on this thing before. Ooh. Anyone who has done that can share with me how.
Can't you use the one that is on Microsoft? One that is on Windows. That normal zooming on Windows.
Oh,
to zoom
but let me
window.
see if this has resumed and it's working. Okay. So
try for Linux.
Come again.
Control
Yeah,
plus.
I've tried Control plus. It's not working. So okay. Let's use this. I think this is working now. Say, Ehoneah Obed. I hope this is better.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, so we stored the name Ehoneah Obed in a variable called name. If we want to print that name, all I need to remember is the variable. I don't need to remember that name that was in there. If I go ahead and I print it, it brings an object for me. That's simple. Okay, so let's say that you're writing a program and the program requires you to enter some secret key. So we need to create a variable called secret key. And the secret key isn't a very friendly key. Let's say this is the key that you require. Imagine if you have to be typing this key throughout your program. How difficult that is going to be, okay? So you just create a variable and store that key in it so that at the end of the day, everywhere in your program that you want to type this key or access the value of the key, you use the variable name. So just by doing this, I can go ahead and print the secret key by this, writing the name of that variable inside the print function. So what have we seen so far? We've seen that print can take the raw literal. Last week we talked about literals. So if it is an integer literal, it can print it out for us. We can print out float literals. Okay, we can print out string literals. So just by putting the string in here directly, we can print it out. We've seen this. Oh, okay, sorry. String literal. So just any string at all, any inclusive. Great. So we can do that. Then we've now seen that we can also print variables directly in here. Okay. In fact, the interesting thing is that almost every type of data in Python can be printed in here. You can put it in there and it will print it. But for now, we are restricting ourselves to the types that we've learned. So going forward, we'll learn about a lot of them. Then we'll see how we are going to use this. Okay, so with the basic knowledge that we have right now, let's build a program. I think there is this folder, this file in here. Okay, so last week we used this. I need to terminate this. Okay. Last week we used this to explain something. But today we just want to make a program that prints out your name. Say first name. So I'll say my first name is Obed. Wait. And my surname is Ehoneah. So all I'm interested in right now is I want to make a program that prints, or let's say a program that displays my full name. Okay, we'll talk about strings. So I'm just taking my time to build on the knowledge. All right, I don't want to lose anybody along the way. So kindly follow, even though it is 30 steps right now. I'll follow. We'll get there. So what I'm going to do is I want to print my full name. Now we've stored variables that will print that we can use to print first name, surname, but then we want to put them together. So how do we do that? Using so I think let me use the interactive mode to explain it. Then we'll write the script. Okay. Okay. So quickly to no. That's one reason why I don't like that interactive mode. All right. So what I did was create a variable called first name and assign it to my first name, which is Obed. Create another variable called last name and assign it to my last name, which is Ehoneah. Oh, I used surname, but anyway. So now we have a variable containing first name and another variable containing last name. If I want to print it, there are several ways that I can go about it to print it. Okay, so I'm still talking about print function. Don't forget this. So in one of the ways I can do this print Then I'll go ahead and say, sorry, I want my first name printed. Then after the first name is printed, I want the last name to be printed. Please pay attention to how I've used it here. So the print will also be able to accept multiple values. All this while what we have done so far is was pass a single value in there, whether it's a variable, it's a literal, string literal, float literal, or an integer literal. We just pass a single value and we print it. Okay, but this time around, we want to go a step further to pass in multiple values. So just by doing this and passing last name as well, let's see what gives us. Ehoneah. Wow. So this is a syntax that you need to pay attention to. We can pass in multiple values to the print function. So the print function doesn't take just one input, what we call an argument. It doesn't take just one argument, but it can take multiple arguments. So just keep that in mind. This means that I can equally do this and say first name, another one, last name. Can go ahead and do another first name. But please don't forget that I am putting some comments in there. Pay attention to that. So now I'll be able to print out all of these together. If I made a mistake and did first name, then last name, which you would have thought should be the right thing because it's just my first name with space in between them and the last name. If you go ahead and do this, you get an error. The error is what? An invalid syntax error. So the print function doesn't take this type of input. What is the difference between what we did here and what we did earlier here? The only difference is that here the two objects or the two arguments that we provided, we separated them with a space, and that is wrong. So by default, if you want to print multiple objects within the print function or multiple values, if you want to pass multiple values to the print function, you need to separate them with a comma. So what I'm talking about is I can go ahead and do this, say hi. Then I do another one. What's your name? Okay. This is acceptable only because I have a comma in the middle. If I eliminated this comma between them, I'm going to get an error. But you see here, I have the perfect thing that I want. And one thing that I want you to pay attention to is that the space that comes in between the two things. So let's say first name, comma, last name. You realize that prior to this particular line that I'm working on right now, I try my best to put a space in between them. So if you haven't used this before, your guess may be that maybe this space that I left in here is what gave us a space between this. But no, let's run this program so that you confirm that. You see that even here, I didn't leave any space. It's just first name followed by the comma. Then right after the comma, there's no space. I have last name, but it's still printed out, leaving the space in between them. So these are the nitty-gritties about the print function that I need you to know so that subsequently when we start using them, it makes sense to you. Okay, once you have separated two values with a comma, the print will automatically put a space between them. We'll soon see how to overcome it. I mean, how to override it so that it doesn't put that space or it should separate it. But for now, just remember that so far as you have separated two values or multiple values with a comma, each of those values will be separated with a space, whether you like it or yes. The print function would always leave the space as soon as it realizes that you are separating them with a comma. I hope that makes sense. So here, I intentionally put the space in here just so it looks readable to me. Okay, so my space here is not what gave us this space. So in the same way, I guess if I do print first name, comma, and I leave a lot of space, then I write last name. You may want to suggest that, okay, we'll have that big space in there, but I guess it will be just one space. And you see the reason why. The print function, what it does is that once you have separated two values with a comma, I'm just going to put them together, but with a single space. So irrespective of how you presented them, the print function will still output them with just a single space. So if you want to leave spaces in when you are adding multiple values as arguments to the print function, then you are doing it just for readability sake, to help you easily identify what you have written there. Okay, that's the only reason why you do that. So I hope this is clear. Let me try clearing my screen then. Okay, good. So let's keep this going. We've talked about that. Then another thing that we should pay attention to is when I print, say, okay, let me just go back. I think I should go back to write the scripts that we're trying to write. Okay. Oh, I didn't save it. Or it was in this one. Okay, yes. So now I believe everyone will be able to write this following the example that we did. Okay, so we'll go ahead and write first name. First name. Then there should be a comma. To use multiple values, there should always be a comma. Then here we use surname. So surname. Oh, my autocomplete is not working. Okay. Surname. So if I go ahead and run this script should be able to print out my name for me. I mean the full name. Okay, so how do we run the script? There are two ways that we can run the script. I think last week I explained it. Either you make this executable so that you call it by its name, or you write Python 3 as the command to use, then the name of the file that you want to execute. So this is the outcome of the script that you created, Ehoneah. So here, if I go in here and I change it to any of my brothers, say Frank, then I come back and write the same code. It's going to print Frank Ehoneah for us. Okay, so basically that is what we have done. But let me print multiple things. I want to show you something. Print multiple things. First, no. So let me just use strings and say country is Ghana. Then current city is Accra. Okay, so let's go ahead and execute this code. To execute this code, the same command Python test1.py. Those of you from ALX should understand that you are not going to be using this other route, but rather the executable route. So if you are going to use the executable route, then you have to make this file executable. You have to make sure that you have this on top of your script. Okay, with what I just did, if I take this away, I still will be able to run my program and it's going to run perfectly. Sorry. Let's run the program. Oh, forgotten the so Python 3, then the name of the file is test1. Okay, so you see that I get it to print from Ehoneah, Ghana, and Accra. These are the things I wanted to print. So this works fine, but as I was saying, for those of you in ALX, you need to have this thing up here. Then afterwards, you need to make your file executable. And by now, you should know how to make files executable, which is the chmod, then just do plus X, then the name of the file, okay, test1.py. Once you do this, your file is now executable, so you can go and use this command just by typing the name of the file itself and running it, and that will also give you the outcome. I don't know which one I'm going to be using, but then if you see me use any of them, you should know why I can use any of them. It all works fine. And all right, good. So I wanted to illustrate something for all of us to see. I think this thing should go ahead. Good. I want to illustrate something for all of us to see. Here, when I print this, the first name, it puts it on the first line. Then I print the next one. Then it puts it on the next line. Then I print the next one. It puts it on the next line. But what if I didn't want to do that? So let me even go ahead and add more to let the sentence make sense. So let me change this as well to my name. Obed, say Obed. Then I'll come here, say Obed Ehoneah comes from, so let's print this, comes from the state. Okay, from Ghana. Then let's do another one. Say stays in Accra. Okay, so now when I go ahead and execute this file, let's pay attention here. When I execute this file, it gives me Ehoneah comes from Ghana, stays in Accra. But unfortunately, they are all put on separate lines. And you and I know that that is not what I want to do. Okay, you may argue that I should have put everything in here, but you realize that when you do that, you get a long line. Okay, and once again, those from ALX, you'll be using the Python style to check your codes, the format of your code, and it doesn't permit you to write more than 79 characters on a single line. So if I'm supposed to go and write all these sentences within this single print function, I'm going to end up getting flagged by that FICO style checker. Okay, and that means that when you submit your codes, you are going to get some wrong. That's just by the way. Okay, but even if you are not submitting code to ALX in your own way, you don't want to write code that is so long that it becomes difficult to read, and you always have to move your scroll bars to go and read them. Okay, so there are things that you really want to present this code like this, but then you want a such that the output will not be on separate lines. So the question is, why at all is it even on separate lines? And the truth or the reality, what is happening behind the scene is that for each print statement, there is something we call the end character. I mean, there is no, not character. Let me not put it like that. But then, by now, we all know about this character, the new line character. Okay, but then we all know about new line character and what it does. Basically, the slash n is a character that indicates to the line of terminal that go to the next line. Okay, so when you take a look at the structure of the print statement itself, the print statement comes in this form. I should minimize this, minimize that. So the print statement is in the form of this. Say here we'll have values that we are going to see, and comma. This argument and then it passes something like a value in here, whatever you decide to put in here. Please let's pay attention. I'll go and illustrate it for you to see. But basically what this means is that when I write my print function, I can indicate this. So we usually refer to all the ones that we'll be putting here as positional arguments. Okay. Oh, that is right. Positional, yes. Positional arguments. Then these extra ones are called keyword arguments. Okay. I hope please, if if I'm making a mistake, you can correct me. But I think it's keyword argument. And what this means is that over here, these ones, the values that we're going to be providing, we are just providing them, and they are going to be printed in a particular order based on their positions. Okay. But here we are using the key. What does this keyword tell us? N means that the character at the end. So by default, the print statement by default is this way: values. So whatever value that you are passing, you have multiple of them. Then it is by default this. N is taking in the new line character. So what this means is that by default, the print statement will always print a new line character. That means that after it has executed, every other thing after it has to be pushed to the next line. By default, that is what the print function does. It says that whenever I am printing, the last character in me is a new line character. So any other thing after me should go to the next line. I don't tolerate any other thing after I have printed to this line. And that is the work of the print function, the default work of the print function. We can, however, count that by changing the value. So if I decide that, okay, I want you to print, say, Obed, but then the next thing to come shouldn't be a new line character, then all I have to do is score and say n is equal to pass whatever I want to pass. Maybe I just want a space, an empty space. So I'll leave that empty space and go ahead with it. So let me go to the editor, then let's implement this. So what I've said so far is that there is a keyword argument here called end, and by default it is this. Okay, by default that is what is there. So if I these I experiment them on the slide. So let me just put them in here so that we'll all see exactly what I'm talking about. This is actually the default representation of the print function. Okay, was not closed. Why?
The commas.
Come again.
Comma.
After, oh, sorry. I was looking at the first one. I was seeing. All right. Thank you very much. Mistake can be frustrating. Okay. So now this is what by default this is what is happening. You would understand later when we start talking about functions that if we know the default value, we can equally ignore this. So let me just go ahead and run this program, and hopefully it will give us the same outcome. You see, it gives us the same outcome. And that's exactly what printf is doing, even if we ignore each one. But then if I decide that no, I don't want this new line character, all I want is just a space. This means that the next line that follows shouldn't be taken to another line. I rather want it to follow immediately, but they should be separated with a space. So let me save this file and go ahead and run it for you to see. You see that now the comes from. So pull this up a bit so that we can compare it from the previous one. From the previous one, we had Ehoneah on one line and comes from on another line. But now we have overridden the default behavior of end in the print function. For that matter, comes from has now been printed on the same line as Ehoneah. And we can equally do same for all the rest. So just go ahead and make those changes. Just leave a space in there for them. As for as for the last one, we can decide to leave it because we know that that is the ending. Let's save this, run our program now. And what do we expect when we run it? Because now we have all of them apart from the very last one, ending with a space. So I expect that we'll have all of them being printed on the same line. But any other thing that will come after this line 10 should be printed on the next line. So let's execute this file and see. Great. So this is what you can see now. We have Ehoneah comes from Ghana, stays in Accra. Maybe I should have added an end here. I hope that makes sense. Ehoneah comes from Ghana and stays in Accra. Well, the only reason why this line, this prompt that we have here is on the next line is because we have this character here. If I had removed this character, let me remove it and run this program for you to see. If I remove this character now, what we are saying is that even the last line, any other thing after the last line should continue. It should just be separated with a space. So let's go ahead and run this, and you see something interesting. See where the prompt now started. It started right after Accra. And the only reason why I did that was because we have overridden the default behavior of print. And we have told it that after you have printed this, any other thing that comes after it should just be separated with a space. That is all. So you can always use this end keyword argument to your advantage, depending on exactly what you want to achieve. If it is a new line character that you want to print, then leave it. Don't even include it because that is the default behavior and automatically it will be added. Any questions on that? Yes, any questions on that?
Yep. What I wanted to ask you, if there is any other means of pushing something to the standard apart from using print.
Yes. Okay. All right. So at now, there's only print that I know. Okay. I know you can use write if you import the OS model, but then the default functions that come in Python, that is like the Python functions. For now, it's Python print that I know. They may be added, but it's print that I know. And as I said, just as we use write in C, you can use write in here, but you'd have to import a model to be able to do that. Okay, so the interesting thing is here you saw me use space to make it nice, but you can actually use anything at all. So I can decide that at the end of the line, this character should follow. Okay, so anything at all, just put it in there and you'll see it in action. Okay, let me now do this. Show you that we can use different ones. Say equal to sign. So I'm just using them to show you exactly what can be done. So you see what is happening here. Between Ehoneah and comes from, we are having this asterisk, asterisk. And the only reason why we have that is because we decided that it should be the ending of that line. So anything that comes after we have printed this line should contain or should be separated with this. Okay, I mean, this should end with that. That's the interpretation. This line should end with these characters. That's all. This line should end with this character. This line should end. So when you take the line, it ends in this character. When you take this line, it ends in that character. So just keep that in mind. Your end will give you what you want to end with. Okay. And once we have covered end, there is another one that we should look at, and it is called set. That helps us put a separator between them. Set. By default, when we printed them, what was it? Prints, and I said first name, comma, second, or surname, sorry, comma, surname. Okay, when I did this initially, you all saw that it wrote Obed and left some space, then wrote Ehoneah. And irrespective of how I arranged them, it still left a single space. And that is because there is a default keyword argument called set that is being used over there. So first name, comma, surname, comma, there is another argument for this, and it's just an empty space in there. So if you want to override it, you just have to pass a different value here. So if I pass a different value and I go ahead and print, then it will no longer have this empty space there, but whatever I put as the sep argument or the value for the sep argument. So what we can do is we can actually have a print statement that contains the values. Let me just write values. Okay. Then when I put a comma and I do dot, 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 I mean you can add as many values as you want, each of them separated with a comma. Then it's eventually, when you are done with what we call the positional argument, you now come to the keyword arguments. And the keyword arguments, we have sep. So you can pass the value to sep, whatever value you want. Then the last one is end. In fact, that's not even the last name, but that's what I'll focus on. So these are the major ones that we need to know right now. Okay, let me quickly switch and show you in practice how that is going to be like. Comment all these out and let's work on this. I talked about commenting last time. So all that I did here was just select all of them, then hold onto control and press the forward slash. So if I do that again, I've uncommented them. If I do it again, now I've commented them. Okay, so if you didn't know, that's basically what I did. So what I'm saying is that if we go ahead and print this, okay, if we go ahead and print this, it gives us with a space here. So the question is, why do we have this space even though, so let me keep this away, even though with the lines that we have here, there is no space between the first name and the surname. But when I printed it, it left a space in between them. The reason it is so is because there is a default value for set. So if you do not include it explicitly, set is actually an empty space like this. So if I go ahead and I run this program again, I should expect the same outcome. So once I'm getting the same outcome, it tells you that this is exactly what is there, even when I decide to ignore the set. So even when I take this out, it is the same implementation. And I tell you that it will make sense once we start learning about functions. You get to understand why we can ignore something if it is the default value. So for now, just keep in mind that if you are going to use the default value of a particular argument in a function, you can leave it without writing it. But if you are not interested in using the default value, that is, you want to override what it by default will do, or you want to provide your own thing that it should follow. For instance, if I want my first name and my surname to be joined together as what? Surname. No, I mean as a username, okay? Because I think that is common usage, where we have the first name, the second name, or the surname put together, and it becomes the username. All that I need is maybe an underscore, okay? So for now, I'm interested in joining my first name and my surname with an underscore. And that's how I do it. Say set, then pass that underscore to it. If I run this program now, you realize that it gives me open underscore Ehoneah. And that is because of this set that I added. Okay? So if you didn't learn anything about printing something to your screen, now you should have learned that we can pass various values to the print function for as long as we separate them with comments. You should have also learned that by default, the print function will always have a new line card at the end. So every other thing that comes after it will be pushed to the next line. But you can override that by passing a specific value to the end argument. The keyword argument called end. So you just by saying end is equal to something something. Okay? Then never forget that anytime that you are going to write something else, you separate with a comma. If you leave out the comma, you have an error. Okay, so here you can see that this has been like I have an error here. All right. So to separate each of them, you need to put them in that way. Then one thing that I should be quick to add is that you can't come and write a positional argument after any of these arguments. They just think, please pay attention here. For these positional arguments, the values that you want to print, okay, you have to provide them, all of them, before you bring any of these keyword arguments. Remember, these ones are called keyword arguments because there is a keyword that we are using. Okay, so that is a keyword that you need to know. And is a keyword that you need to know. So we are calling them keyword arguments. As for these ones, we just use their position to identify them because they can change. Like here, even though you have surname here, if I go ahead and change this to last name, there is nothing like surname in here again. So it's giving me an error and I have to change this to last name. Okay, so we use their positions to determine how they are going to appear. Therefore, we call them positional arguments. So all that I'm saying right now is that your positional argument, all of the positional argument that you are going to put in the print function should come before any of the keyword argument will come. It's as simple as that. Okay, and well, this is what I'm going to talk about now about the print function. Later, when we talk about strings, we'll look specifically about all the things that we can do with it. But then, another thing I need you to know is that these are not the only keyword arguments that you can use in the print function. In fact, there is another keyword argument called file. That will help us identify where exactly we want to print it to, but now we are not interested in it. And for those of you who may be interested in reading about all the various ways you can use the print function or any function at all in Python, you can do this. Let me bring out the interactive code. First of all, clear the screen or the interactive mode. You can use this command help. Then pass the function to it. Say print. Just hit enter. Okay, so this is giving you what print like. By default, this is print. Print takes a value. Okay, then several other values can also be provided, but you should separate each of them with a comma. Then it has this keyword argument called set, and now you understand what set is. So by default, set is just an empty string or just the space, okay? Then it has another keyword argument called end. And end by default is a new line character, which you can override by putting any other thing. It has another called file. And file by default is the system.standard output, which simply means that the terminal that we are using. So you can override that to push whatever you are printing, you can push it to a different source or a different output area or anything like that. And flash to the buffer that is used to store the data that you are going to print. You can decide to flash it or not. Okay, but then just knowing these two, you'll be fine using prints all your life. Okay, in special cases, you may want to come and use any of these. But then, if at any point in time you want to find out about a function in Python, just as I've shown you, just run help on that function and it gives you the info. So these are optional keyword arguments, as you can see explained here. All right, now let's go and talk about inputs. We spend so much time on output. So here I had to hard code my name in here. But what if I wanted to make my program so flexible that anybody at all can use the program and input their name, okay, in there? How am I going to go about that? Okay, so basically there is another function called input. There is another function called input. So we've learned about print. The next function we are learning about is inputs. Okay, as simple as that. We can actually go ahead and use it like that. So let me try. Inputs. If I do inputs. Okay, so let me just explain this. What input does is that it returns whatever the user is going to type from your keyboard. Okay, so if I run this program, the first prompt that will show up is for me to type something. And once I type it, it's going to return it. So now that we've learned about variables, we can use the variable to store whatever the input is going to return. Does that make sense? If I use the input, whatever you type in is going to be returned by the input. So at the end of the day, maybe I should call the interactive mode so that you see exactly what I'm talking about. Switching between these two modes is not easy. So if I just go ahead and I do inputs, remember that it's a function. Okay, I said we will later learn more about what functions are, but for now, just remember that it is a function. So we have to enclose it with a parenthesis. I mean, end it with a parenthesis. If I hit enter, it's waiting for me to type something. That's a prompt that is waiting, but it's not informative enough. I didn't even know. If you didn't know that, or if I'm not here to tell you that this is what it's doing, you will not know exactly what it's asking you to do. But if I go ahead and I type Obed, see what it did. It's brought Obed to me. So it returns whatever you type. That's basically what the input does. Okay. So by saying first name is equal to input. Just by doing this, if I run it, all that I'm doing now is that this Obed that I'm typing, store that value inside first name, so that going forward, anytime I search for first name, it should give me what I typed. So if I hit enter, you see this time it didn't display it. It has returned that value to this variable called first name. So if I go ahead and I just do first name, it gives me the same outcome because input now stored that thing that I typed on my computer on into first name. So if I do x is equal to input, maybe I want your age, and I just did s is equal to input, give me your age. If I hit enter, it's waiting for the age. So let's say I type in 99 as the age and hit enter. It has stored 99 in X. So now if I use X anywhere. X is 99. I hope that makes sense. So basically, we can use input to collect input from the user. If you want your user to type something, and most often than not, you would find yourself requesting your user to type something. Let's say you build a platform, you need them to type their username, their password, then you go and check and paste. You need to use the input to accept whatever they are bringing. Then after you have gotten whatever they type, you can now go ahead and do anything you want to do with it. But just as I've indicated, why, let's say 8 is equal to input. This is not very informative because it just shows a prompt and I don't know what it is asking of me. So what we can do is that we can ask the input to actually spell out something to tell the user that, hey, I want your age. That is what I am requesting for. So how do we do that? We do that by using this. So the input. Then inside the input, we are going to pass a string in here and say, what's your age? What's your age? Okay? But I am intentionally doing this to show you some of the things. Here, I've written what's your age. But then immediately I hit enter. It's asking me what's your age, except that the prompt is directly after the age. So even if I go ahead and I type 78, you see there's no space between age and 78. This means that anytime you are using input, you have to control that spacing. Okay, but then if I go ahead and click 78, now 78 has been stored in age. So if I type age, you see that it gives me 78. I hope this makes sense. So the ideal thing that you should do is when you type input, put what's your name, your age, sorry, leave a space before your closing quotation marks and closing parentheses. Then now hit enter. It leaves that space for you and you can go ahead and type 56 as your age. Then you get the value. You could have equally used my age is equal to like anything at all. All right. If I now go ahead and type age, it gives me 56. But from our lesson on literals, you realize that everything that I've accepted from input so far, when I print it out, even though, no, I'm not using the print function, but I mean, when I output it, this is the interactive mode. So I'm able to output it without necessarily using the print function. When I output it, you see that the value is actually in a single quotation mark. What does that tell us? This one, I need someone from the audience to tell me what does this what information can you glean from this? Seeing that even though I type a number 67, when it gives me, or 78, when it gives me, it puts the 78 in a quotation mark. Why is that so? Or what information can you get from it? What do you think? Yes, anyone? Yes? Oh, there are a lot of you here.
Hello.
Hi, Tony.
Yes, I think the output is a string.
Exactly. Thank you very much. So we've talked about string literals, and I've said that anytime you have a collection of characters, okay, put into a quotation mark, whether single, double, even triple quotation marks, we consider them as a string. And before we leave today, we have to talk more extensively about strings. But just remember, so anything returned by inputs, irrespective of what was typed, will be stored as a string. It has significance, so we need to know that. Because maybe you want to do some mathematical calculations with integers. You expected a person to enter their age as an integer so that you add some magic number to their age and predict something for them. Unfortunately, whatever the input is returning is going to be what? A string. So kindly pay attention to it. We'll get to it soon. But for now, let's get back to our scripts. Now that we know how to use inputs instead of using, oh, sorry. I wanted to delete this one. So instead of hard coding the name, I'd rather want to ask the person to input their name. What's your first name? Okay. Then what's your, so let me change this to surname. I prefer that. And say inputs. So if you want to learn more about what the input function requires, I mean the various arguments, you can use help, run help on it, and you get to see exactly what it requires. But for now, we are going to make do with this one. What's your surname? Then I leave a space. Okay. All right. Great. So let's change this back to surname. If I run this program, Python is going to run a program from top to bottom. So the very first thing to do is that it's going to ask me, what's your first name? Then I will type my first name. It will assign that value to first name. Then the next thing is going to ask me, what's your surname? I'll type in my surname, and it's going to assign it to surname. Okay, so I can put columns here, column, and column. All of these will be determined by you when you are designing your program. So let's go ahead and run this file. That is .t. So it's asking me, what's your first name? My first name is Obed. What's your surname? My surname is Ehoneah. Now it printed out Obed Ehoneah. So I want it to rather print your full name is, so say print your full name is. Now what will I do here? I can even, let's do this. Okay, I need this, then comma. I need to override the end. Please don't forget that. I need to override end so that it doesn't push the next print statement to the new line. I want it to print your full name is Obed Ehoneah. So let's save this and run the program again. What's your name? Your first name, Obed. Second name, Ehoneah. And he says your full name is Obed Ehoneah. So as simple as that, you can go ahead and ask several other questions. What's your age? So now, let's design our first program. First program. This program is an age calculator. I'm just coming up with something. So let's call it age_cap.py. And basically, this program that we are writing will request that our users give us their year of birth. Yes, maybe year of birth. I think year of birth. Okay, now you can go and develop it anyhow you want, but then we just want the year of birth, and we'll be able to tell how old a person is. Okay, so all I need is your year of birth, or maybe I'll just go ahead and ask, okay, year of birth, month of birth, date of birth. Then I'll be able to print all of those things. So let's start. What will this file do? We want it to. So this is an age calculator. Okay, we start by saying year of birth is year of birth. We call this variable year of birth, and it is equal to, we have to ask for the user's year of birth. Stay interesting. Okay, so I'm transitioning to a new subtopic called type conversion. Okay, and I think this is a perfect example for us to do. So let's go ahead with it. What's your year of birth? month of birth is, so what the string in there is up to you. Okay, so I can just say month of birth from 0 to 12, just to prompt you that I want you to choose between 0 to 12, okay, something like that. But it's totally up to you. However you want to implement it, it's totally up to you. Then the very day of birth, so say day of birth is equal to input your day of birth, day of birth. Would that make sense? Or make it the date of the month? Day of the month. I think that will day of the month. So that we know that it's either first, second, third, fourth, any of those things. Okay. So now that we have it, for now, let's just go ahead and print out the person's date of birth. So we say your date of birth. Your date of birth is, then date of birth is, let's override this. I want to use another print statement. So print, how do we want to arrange it? We want to arrange it this way. So date of birth, month, each of them separated with a hyphen. Then year. Okay, I think we can do that. So we'll go with day of birth, followed by a string which is a hyphen. Then that will also be followed by the month of birth, another hyphen, then year of birth. Sorry. Year of birth. Okay. Hopefully everything works. So what I've done here is that these are values that I'm passing to the print statement. This is specifically a variable that we have declared, and we will obtain the value from here. Then we have the hyphen, then we have month of birth, we have hyphen, then year of birth. So if we go ahead and run this, let's go ahead and run it. What's your, oh no. Okay, so that is not what I'm using. Saban user the use Python 3. Okay, then let me make this executable. Oh, just the control tool. So let's make that an executable. To do that, chmod plus x, then age, blah, blah, blah. Great. So now we can go ahead and run age stock up. It says, what's your year of birth? Let's say, choose, today is the Ehoneah's birthday, so 09, yes. That was when he was born. Which month? He was born on September. September is 09. Okay. So let's do 09. Then day of the month is 21st. So that is Dr. Ehoneah's birthday. Those of you who do not know anything about Ghana, today I've told you something about Ghana. Yeah. So it says your date of birth is 21st September 1909. So basically now that's what our program is doing. It asks you for information, then it gives you an output. But as I said, we want to be able to calculate the age. So now we should be able to tell that Dr. Ehoneah is this number of years old if he was to be alive. Okay, so how do we do that? Let me go to the board. Let's use the board. You have somebody's year of birth, you have their month and their day. Let's focus on just using the year of birth, okay? So if I have your year of birth and I want to know your age, what do I have to do? I just need the current year, right? What's the current year that we are in? I just need that one. Then let's subtract your year of birth from the current year. And that will give me your age. So for Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's one, I have to do 2022 minus his year of birth, which was 1909. Right? Mathematicians give us the value. But then the problem that we have currently is that we are using the input function. And input always returns a string. We have said that. It always returns what? A string. And we are going to look at strings. But the one thing you should know about strings is that we can't do the normal arithmetic addition or subtraction. So I can't use that value that I've gotten from the end user and say 2020 minus what the end user passed, because the end user passed something like this. And we are going to get an error if we try. So how are we going to go about it? This brings us to the topic of type conversion, converting one type to the other. When we started, I mentioned that there are 4 major data types that we need to be aware of. Okay, there are 4 major data types that we need to be aware of. These data types, as I mentioned, include strings, it includes integers, floats, and Booleans. Okay, so strings, as we'll soon be talking about extensively, is just a collection of characters. Integers, as we know, is just a whole number without a decimal part or a fractional part. Then floats are numbers with fractional parts or numbers with decimals. Now, is it possible for us to convert a string to an integer? The answer is yes. And is it possible to do any of these? So we can actually do any of these conversions. But the question is, when does it become necessary? And already we have seen a case where it has become necessary for us to convert from a string to an integer. The interesting thing is that by default, the Python interpreter does some form of type conversion. Those ones, they will not ask you, they will do it by themselves. Okay, so we have what we call, there are 2 types of type conversion. We have the implicit, where the interpreter is doing it by itself or is doing it for you. So you don't tell it that, hey, I need you to convert to this type, then give me the outcome. No. But then the next one is explicit, where you have to explicitly tell the interpreter that I need you to convert from this form to the other form. So what we currently have as a situation at hand, the system is not doing it automatically for us. So we have to do it. But let me switch back to the data, then show you the situation in which the system will automatically do it for us. That is the implicit type conversion. Go to interactive mode. Here, if I add an integer to a float, what should be the outcome? Ideally, if I add an integer to an integer, I get an integer. If I add a float to a float, okay, it gives me a float. But what if I add an integer to a float? Which type should this return? So over here, you may decide, when you are writing, you may explicitly decide what type of data you want to let the interpreter bring or return. But then the interpreter on its own can do by default a type of conversion. And here, when I hit enter, you see the outcome. The outcome is a float. And all that is telling us is that when you add an integer to a float by default, your interpreter is going to convert your answer to a float. Is that simple? So the reason why it does that is that the interpreter doesn't want you to lose the decimals, because if it converts it to an integer, those decimals will be lost. In the same way, if even I end up dividing an integer by an integer, this time I'm not in a float, I'm dividing an integer by an integer, you presume that I should get an integer as an outcome, but that is not the case. I get a float as the outcome. The reason being that upon this division, there is some form of decimal that we don't want to lose. So your interpreter is forced to do a conversion. Even though you did division of two integers, it is forced to convert your value to a float. If you are looking to just get the integer one, then you can do that. But the interesting part here is that there is what we call an integer divisor or division symbol. Okay, so the normal division symbol in Python is known as a float division symbol. It is always going to return a float. So if I do 2 divided by 2, we all know the answer is 1, but Python returns 1.0. So what you should remember is that anytime you do a normal division in Python, it whatever you added. So whether you divided, I mean, the values that you divided, whether you divided an integer by an integer, or a float by a float, or an integer by a float, or a float by an integer, it will always convert the outcome to a float. Okay, so that is an implicit conversion. And there is this other type that we call the integer division. So when you use the division symbol twice, last video, I talked about this. So if I go ahead and I do, remember here, I got 45 divided by 2 gave me 22.5. But here, if I go ahead and I run it, it gives me 22. I said this is also known as floor division. It's always fixed the last, the lowest integer. Okay, so it runs it to the lowest integer. So ideally, you would have thought that 22.5 it should run it up to make it 23, but it's always used the floor. It's a floor division, so it runs it to the lower integer. That is enough for implicit division, implicit conversion or type conversion. Okay, just know that it exists. Python has the ability to automatically convert from one type to the other. But there are cases where we need to do that conversion ourselves. So how do we achieve that? And it's quite simple. There are some functions that we need to know about. Remember, I said that for now, just when I say this is a function, just keep it in your mind. Okay, print is a function. And we write it by writing it this way, the name of the function print followed by that. I've also said input is a function. We'll talk about it when we start looking at functions. But now just remember this. So there are some number of functions that can help us do what we call the type conversion. For explicit type conversion, where we are the ones doing it, there is another term that we can give it. It is also called typecasting. Okay, so for those of you who have done C programming already, you learned typecasting from one type to the other. Okay, or a pointer type, a different pointer type to the other. All right, that is similar to what we are doing here when you are changing from one data type to the other. So basically, these are some of the functions. Please take note of the functions. These functions, we have a function called int. So what it does is anything that you pass to it is going to convert it into an integer. We have string. Anything that you pass to it is going to convert it to a string. We have floats. As simple as that. So far as you put these brackets or parentheses in front of them, they are functions. And just as their name sounds, this will convert it to what? A float. This will convert it to a string. This will convert it to an integer. We have adders, okay? Maybe I shouldn't touch on them right now. But okay, let me mention these ones. So we have something like main, where we use it to convert whatever we pass to it. We are converting it to what? Base 2 number or binary. So we have the opt as well to base 8. We have hex to base 16. So just know them at least. You should know these three, if for nothing at all from today's lesson. Remember that we use n to convert whatever it is inside that we pass to it to integer. Then we use stir to convert it to strings. We use float to convert it to float. All right, so now we can get back to our program that we are building. The program that we are building, you and I know that these values that we are taking currently, the year that we want to use to do our calculation, unfortunately, this year is being given to us as a string. So we need to convert a string to an integer. Which function are we going to use to do that? Question to the audience. Yes, which function are we going to use to convert the string to an integer? Yes, Sadiq.
Okay.
The int function.
Okay, if you want a function to convert it to an integer, right?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes,
You
we can hear
use
you.
the int.
The int. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes.
Right.
So we can use the int function. So just as I said, we want to calculate the age of the parameter. Let's call a variable age. And we said that the age should be what? The current year. So I prefer that we make this program dynamic as possible. So let's ask the end user, whoever is going to use our program, to tell us what is the current year, so that our program will be able to automatically calculate it for us. Current year. So we expect you to give us what the current year is. In which year are you now? Okay. So let's just ask them for an answer. Now, if they give us the answer, we want to estimate the age or calculate the age. How then do we do that? We know that a person is going to provide us their year of birth. They are also going to provide us what their current year. Once we have these two, it's just a matter of saying current year minus year of birth. Ideally, this should be the solution. I mean, this should give us the answer, because that's what we are looking for. But you and I have established that this is not going to work. Maybe I should run it for you to see. Okay, good. Run this. Say 1909, then 09, then the month, day of the month is 21st. In which year are we now? We are in 2022. Then we get an error. So now I believe that everyone here on this live session or watching the video at a later time understand why we got that error. The only reason is because we are doing the subtraction on strings, and that is not allowed. So if we are not allowed to do that, then we simply have to say int, then pass the string to it. As simple as that. That will help us now convert whatever outcome we are getting from our end user to an integer. So just by doing this, we now have age being an integer. So we can go ahead and print the person's age. So let's say, let me print or display the age. So how will I do that? I'll just say print and say you are okay. There's something that we can easily do, but then I've not taught you, so I'm not going to do that right now. Let me just pass this. So you are, then the age. Let me close this. You are this. Then I'll print another line saying years old. Very soon we will get to find the easiest way around it. This years old, sorry. Years old. Okay, but I should override the default here. Don't forget all of these things that we've talked about. Just so it prints on the same line. So now we have a working program. This program is an age calculator that you and I have built over here. So all that we did was what? We went ahead, let's run this program. Asked you year of birth. The year of birth is 1909. Then month of birth is 09. Day of the month was 21st. In which year are we now? We are in 2022. It says that your date of birth is 21st September 1909. You are 113 years old. Any questions so far on what we have done? So this means you can convert from one type to the other. I don't want to spend time on that because we don't have a lot of time at hand. Any questions on that so far? Okay, good. I believe we are all good with this. Now, let me quickly, within the next 3 minutes, talk about Booleans. I think what I should do is bring up the interactive mode. Then we'll use that. Booleans basically help us, they help us make decisions with our programs. And very soon we'll learn about how to control the flow of the program with conditional statements and loops and things. But then we need to know the data type called Boolean. And basically, if you have done mathematics, I'm sure you might have even come across it. It's just true or false. Those are just the two elements, true or false. So if I go ahead and I write true, it prints true for me. Remember, during the last video, I showed you that there are keywords in Python that you need to know about. Okay, true is one of them. And see how it is written with a capital T. So if I go ahead and I do this, that is not the same thing. So you see, it gives me an error saying name error, true is not defined. False, true is the same thing. False is a data type that is known and it's capital F. So if you go ahead and write false with a small letter F, your program doesn't know it, okay? And basically, anytime you are using logic, so last week we looked at the logical operators. You are looking for whether this and that or like comparison operators. So for instance, if I want to say is 3 greater than 2, if I say 3 greater than 2, it's going to give me true because 3 is greater than 2. As simple as that. If I say 2 is greater than 3, that will give me false because it is false. 2 is not greater than 3. So that is how we use the Boolean data type. That's basically how you use the Boolean data type. And I just want you to know how it is written. As soon as we start talking about controlling the flow of your program, they will come in handy. So for now, let's just stick to this, then quickly jump to strings. This is the most important part of today's session. Strings, because almost everything that you'll be writing in your program is a string. Very, very important, very interesting. Go back here, say strings. You have a lot to learn about strings, okay? A lot to learn about strings. But I hope you understand. If you don't understand how to work with strings, going forward, it may be a bit difficult to comprehend some of the things that we do. So I'm pleading with you, pay particular attention to what strings are and everything that we are going to learn about strings. So basically, we've established that a string is what? A collection of characters. Collection of characters. It could be any number of characters, including 0. It could be any number of characters, including 0. So we can have an empty string. An empty string is a collection of no characters, like 0 characters. Okay? A collection of characters that are enclosed in quotation marks. Okay, quotation marks. And these quotation marks could be, it could be single quotation marks, it could be double quotation marks, or triple quotation marks. They are all allowed. Then, a very important characteristics of string that you need to know is that they are immutable, or they are unchangeable. The members of a string, that is the various characters that a string is made up of, cannot be edited once you have created a string. Remember that. So, by definition, by way of definition, a string is a collection of characters, any number of characters, including zero. I mean 0 characters. So you can have an empty string, which is enclosed in quotation marks. And those characters that are enclosed in quotation marks are not mutable. You can't edit them once you've created it. Great. So let's use our interactive mode to experiment with strings. Okay, so what have I said? You need the quotation marks. There's the obed inside quotation mark. This is a string. The same way, if I do these 2 quotation marks, I didn't put anything in there, but I still recognize as a string. Remember that I said an empty string. So this is a string without a character. All that I did was the quotation marks. And I've also said that the quotation marks, we can use the single quotation marks, and we can use double quotation marks. We can equally even use triple quotation marks. So you can have something like this: my name. Even though in Python, triple quotation marks have special meaning, so we tend to reserve them for that. But then also, whenever you want to write multi-line strings, like statements, long statements, the best to use is the quotation mark. So if your string is going to go beyond just a single line, then it's ideal for you to use the triple quotation marks. So basically, that is the definition of a string. Okay, but permit me to mention that when we started last week, I talked about various paradigms that Python as a programming language obeys, and I mentioned one key one called object-oriented programming. It's a paradigm that the Python programming language obeys, and very soon we'll get to start talking about them, and it will all make sense. But for now, just permit me to say that everything in Python is considered as an object. Okay, and you and I know objects, various objects. Let me ask you right now, what object are you using to participate in this live session? Is it a computer or a phone? You know, it is an object. Okay, so when we get to object-oriented programming, I'll explain all of these things and it will make so much sense. But now, just remember that you have what? A phone is an object. You, the human being, are an object. Anything is an object. So that is how we are trying to model that in programming, so that our programs that we write we can put certain things together as objects. And basically, what makes something an object, okay, even though there are several other things that we can talk about, but for the purposes of today's lesson, remember that an object has properties. So I can ask you, what brand of phone are you holding? That's a property. Okay? Then the object too has some methods or functionalities. Can your phone take a picture? Yes. That method is in there. You can take a picture. You, the human being, can you smile? Yes. So that is a method that you as an object can do. The dog can bark. Like various objects have their properties and they have their methods or functions that they can perform. So that is all that I need you to know about objects for today. And what I went that route is to say that everything in Python is an object. For that matter, the string that we are dealing with is also an object. And I've explained that every object has what? Properties and methods, or they can do some things. That means that for each string that we write in Python, they have some methods. I hope that makes sense. Each string that we write in Python has some methods or some functionalities or some actions that we can perform on them. Okay, and we'll be seeing some of them soon. One of the common objects that we can talk about is the case. An object, the method of string is a case. Let's talk about lowercase, uppercase, capitalized. Okay, so if you have seen, let me just go ahead and say my name is Ehoneah. So here, what I've done right now is I've created a variable called name, and it's equal to Ehoneah. Oh, sorry, it has been assigned to Ehoneah. Ehoneah has been assigned to the variable name. Okay, that is what I've done here. But then this name is containing what? A string, and we have established that a string can have what? A method known as the lowercase method. Okay, let me take it easy for you to understand. So if I go ahead and I print name, what does it print? Ehoneah starting with what? A small letter E. But then, what if I want my name to be spelled out in capital letters? There is a method, and please pay attention here. To use a method in Python, once you have an object here, the name is representing an object that contains, is a variable that is representing an object. It's a string object, or an object that contains what? A string. So once you have the name of that object, all you need to do is say dot, then you bring the method. Remember, I kept saying method or action word or function. And already I've established that functions are just words that are having the parentheses enclosing them. So the method, one method that we can talk about here, upper, is going to convert whatever string that you have to uppercase. Okay, so all that you need to tell it to make it a method is to bring that parenthesis in front of it. So let me go over it again. We have name, that is the variable or the string objects that we are currently having, which we have been working with already. If I go ahead and delete these extra ones and I hit it, you know that it is storing something called Ehoneah. So if I want to apply the method on it, I said to apply a method on an object, you bring the dot. Then after bringing the dot, now go ahead and type the name of that method. So in our case, the name of the method we are using is upper, but it's a method. A method is a function, so we put the parentheses in front of it. Now, if you go ahead and hit enter, it gives us our name all in capital letters. That's cool. So this method has been applied on whatever object we had. Very important. The same way, if let's say name is this, create another one, say first name, or just say first is equal to. The next time around, I am typing it in caps. Okay, and I want to convert it to lowercase. All that I have to do is say first, then I want to call an object. I want to call a method on this object. So I do my full stop or the dot. Then the name of the method. The name of the method here is lower. I want to convert it to lowercase. So what will I do? Lower, then end it with the opening and closing parentheses. Just tell you that this is a function. Then hit enter. It brings my name in lowercase. Okay, this will come in very handy as soon as we start writing correct programs that have real world implications. Okay, so kindly pay attention to this. But then there are a lot of methods, and you and I, even like right now as I'm sitting here, I can't call out all the methods that you can write on a string. Okay, so what we can do is just call help. If you call help on, I think, step, it should give you an idea of all the methods that you can use. Okay, so here you, for now, ignore the ones with the underscore. It will make sense when we start talking about the object-oriented programming. But these other ones are explained here. So for instance, when you say ends with, it tells you that if you do a string dot ends with, then it returns true if the string ends with a specified suffix. Okay, so whatever that, if you want to check, okay, let me check if this string that you have given me actually ends with this particular element or not. Okay, so for instance, okay, you let me not, I don't want to waste time on all of these things because there are a lot of them. So you take your time and read on them to get to know what are the various methods that I can apply on the string, a given string, and how do I use it. All of them are here. When I use it, what does it return? Okay, very important. Let me just go back, rewind to how I got there, because that's what I wanted to teach you about string methods. Now you know how to apply the method. After you have any string object, if you want to apply a method to it, just do the dot after the name of the object, followed by the name of the method. But how do we know the various methods that are available for your use on a string? I said you just write help. Help is a function. So you enclose it. I mean, you bring your closing, opening and closing parentheses, but inside it, that's what you are looking for. We are looking for the various methods that are available on a string. So we pass stay or string in there, then we hit enter. It gives us all the information. These ones will make sense later. The underscore ones will make sense later. I don't want to bore you with them right now. But then calm down. They are arranged in alphabetical order. From here, the first one is capitalized. It says it return a capitalized version of the string. More specifically, make the first character have uppercase and the rest lowercase. So if you have a sentence and you want to make sure that each line, I mean not line, each sentence begins with a capital letter, then you are going to use capitalize. Okay, we have case code, center, count, and all of these, so you can easily get access to that. Any question concerning that particular one? Yes. Any question concerning that? Otherwise, let's move on to operations on strings. That is also a very important part. What kind of operations can we perform on strings? We realized later that we can't be subtracting strings. So what else can we do on strings? One, operations on string. So there are some form of arithmetic operations that we can do on strings. However, they do not follow the normal arithmetic logic that we know. So we have addition, that is using the addition symbol on strings. Then we have the multiplication on strings as well. However, they do not produce the same outcome as our normal arithmetic. Whenever you use the addition operator on strings, you are actually doing what we call concatenation, which basically means you are joining the strings. That's basically what it means. You are joining the strings. So if I do Obed plus Ehoneah, that is basically what I'm doing. It's going to give me Obed Ehoneah because I've concatenated them, I've joined them. So anytime you want to join two strings together, you can use the plus sign. Okay? Then when we use this multiplication sign, or in this case, asterisk on our keyboard, what we are doing is that we are repeating the string, okay, a number of times. So this is for repetition. Repetition, I think so. Okay, so now let's jump to our editor and do some coding here. Right? Okay, let me clear this. Then Python 3. So let's create name is equal to Obed. Then surname is equal to Ehoneah. So if I go ahead and I do name plus surname, as I showed you earlier, I get Obed Ehoneah as one string. So I've joined two strings together into one. And that is what you can see right now. Two strings have been put together as one. I can equally go ahead and, but I think one thing you should pay attention to is the fact that there was no space between them. Because you put them together as one string, you didn't indicate that there was a space in there. So it just literally takes this Obed, Ehoneah, join them together. So if you want to have space in between them, then you have to provide a space as another string. Remember that empty space is also a string. So far as it's enclosed in quotation marks. Okay, so when I do this, what I've currently done is that I've concatenated three strings. The first one is name, which is Obed. The second one is just an empty space. Then the last one is surname. So if I go ahead and I print it, you see I have Obed space Ehoneah. The reason being that I added a space in between them. So don't forget that when you are using concatenation, you are joining them together. There is no room for spaces. You have to explicitly create the space if you need it. Okay. Once we have said that, now let's take a look at the multiplication. Maybe I should just simply do this. Say E. Then multiply E by 7. What do you expect? Okay, let me multiply it by 2 for the start. What we expect now is that we have double of it. So it repeats it 2 times. Okay, so I said multiplication is for repetition. It repeats it 2 times. If I now go ahead and I do E multiplied by 100, then you should expect that it repeats it 100 times. Anytime you want to repeat a string, say my name. The name there is Obed. I want to repeat it 3 times. I do name times 3, and it gives me Obed, Obed, Obed. Remember that it's like the concatenation. There's no space between them. So if you want to create space in between them, there has to be some form of logic to control it. We haven't gotten to a state where we can do that right now. But then, otherwise, you'll probably put the name that you want, okay? So maybe you would create the name with a space. So assuming I did this Obed with space, then I did times 3. This will rather print Obed space, Obed space, Obed. The reason being that I left space in here, okay? So that is it for the 2 operations, the addition operation and the addition, yes, multiplication on strings. Now let's take a look at another kind of operation that we can do on strings, and that is called indexing. Indexing. If you are coming from a C background, by now you know indexing of arrays or arrays index. Okay, and basically we can say in a way that a string is an array of characters, a collection of characters. And for each character, say we said name is equal to Obed. Okay. What is happening here is that these can be identified character by character. So you know that is the first character, second character, third character, and the fourth character or the last character. So here we use a term called index to access them. Index is just integers that we use to identify them depending on their position in the string. Okay, but we begin counting from 0. So the very first one is index 0, the next one index 1, index 2, index 3. Okay, so we have 0, 1, 2, 3. Even though you can see 4 elements here, because we are starting to count from 0, we begin getting 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so how can we access a member of the string or a character within the string using its index? We use this symbol, which you'll be seeing a lot of when we start talking about data structures. But for now, just remember that if you want to access the index of anything at all, use the square brackets. So if I go ahead and I do name the square brackets, I pass in 0. If I should print out this, it's going to print O for me because that is the index 0. If I do same and I do name 3, it's going to print D for me because that is what is at index 3. Very simple stuff. Just use indexing to access members of a string. Okay. However, the caveat is that you shouldn't use an index more than what you have. So we have index 0, 1, 2, 3. If I now call index 4, I'm going to get an error because index 4 does not exist. So quickly, let me jump to my editor. So this, then let's still use name is equal to Obed. Great. So what I'm saying is that if I go ahead and I do index of 0, remember 0, it gives me O because the very first element that's in the 0 is O. If I do index of 1, it gives me B. If I do index of 2, you should know what to expect. If I go ahead and I do index of 3, you should know what to expect. But if I do index of 4, now I've gone beyond what is available. So you see index error, string index out of range. So what you have passed here, this 4 is out of range. We have only up to the 3. The indexes that we have here is from 0 to 3. So if you provide anything more, then that is wrong. Also, if you go ahead and provide an index in the form of a string, I believe that should throw an error as well. This is a type error. String indexes must be integers. So you can pass a string in here. It should always be what? An integer or an integer. So it should be 0, not 0 in quotation marks. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And we can jump to the next one. So with this, you can access each member, no matter the location. You can access the member of the member, I mean the character in the string. Okay. One thing that I should say is that there is one function. Probably we should learn about a function here, known as length, and it tells us the length of a string. Okay, that so if I have written a string, let me quickly go here. Oh, if I've written a string, say message, and my string is a lot of text in there, a lot of characters, something of this sort, and I want to know how long this string is, all I need is call that function length and pass message to it. Okay, hit enter. Then it tells me there are 59 characters over here. 59 characters. Remember that this is a character. The empty space is a character. Don't ever forget that. It's a character. In fact, anything that you can type on your keyboard, whether you're using space bar, or you're using any symbol, so far as you can input it from your keyboard onto your screen. If you put it within a quotation mark, it is a character, and that means that we have a string once they are enclosed in quotation marks. Okay, I think there is one thing about the indexing that I forgot to mention. We have what we did right now is positive indexing, but we also have negative indexing. So for instance, with negative indexing, we start counting from -1, and all that it does is it counts from the very last character in the string. So if I want to pick this particular value, okay, it will be difficult for me to now start counting 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 59. Can you imagine that? So the easiest way for me to get that last character is for me to do message, then say -1 as my index. If I pass -1 as my index, it's giving me F, which is the last character in that string. Very important. So in the same way, I could do message -10. That means it's going to start counting from here. Start counting. This is -1, -2, -3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. These are negative. So I'm expecting that as my answer. B is a character. Okay, so that is how you use negative indexing. It will become very important going forward. So remember, if you want to count going forward, you use the positive indexes. And positive index begins from 0. You start counting from 0. However, if you want to start from the end, you use the negative indexing, and that begins from the -1. Very important. Okay, the next operation that I should talk about is, we are far behind time right now, and I need to rush and finish, but this is very important, so let me talk about this. We call something slicing. Okay, slicing. You know, slice of breads, right? You can slice something. So for strings, we can equally slice our strings, assuming you are not interested in every part of the string, or not just a single member of that string. So when I did name is equal to Obed, and I did, okay, I want the middle one. What I did was say, I did name, then I passed index 2. So this 0, 1, 2. So it gave me E. But what if I'm interested in, maybe I want to create a username for you, okay? And that username, what I want to do is that, I think this is an interesting thing. Use the first 3 letters of your surname plus the first 3 letters of your first name, okay? So I can make this F name and this surname, Ehoneah. So I want to create a username. So your username at the end of the day should be equal to first 3 characters here and first 3 characters here combined. Maybe combine with an underscore. How then do I get the first 3 characters here and the first 3 characters here? That's when slicing comes into use. So we are going to slice that string. So how do we slice a string? It's simple. We have a similar notation as we do with indexing, but we introduce a new element. That is the column. So this is the nature. It is this. This is the nature of slicing. There is a column in between there. We have a number here, an integer here, and an integer here. And basically, please pay attention to what I'm going to say. This is known as the start, and this is known as the end index. So the start index and the end index. But then when you are interpreting slicing, this is how you interpret it. You interpret it as slice this string starting from this index and end right before this. Remember what I said. right before this. So you don't include the end index. Instead, you should end right before that index. Start from this particular index, the starting index, but end right before the end index. So you don't include the end index, it should be excluded. So if I want to slice Obed, what I can do is say F name. Then where are we starting from? We are starting from index 0. So 0 colon. Then where do I want to end? I want to print up to here. Okay, I want to print up to here. So if I go ahead and I write up to index 2, that is wrong, because this interpretation is that start printing from index 0, but then end right before index 2. That means end at what? Index 1. So if I actually want to include index 2, then I should be ending at 3. Let's do practicals for you to see what I mean by that. So go ahead. No. Okay, so let's create our first name. First name is Obed. Okay, and what I'm saying so far is that if you want part of it, first name, I want part of it, the first 3 characters. So I do starting from index 0 and before index 3. Remember how we counted this? This is 0, this is 1, 2, and 3. I don't want to include 3, so that is what I use, and before 3. That's the interpretation. If you write 3 here, it means that 3 will not be included, or whatever character is at index 3 will not be included. So if I go on and enter, it returns the first 3 characters. I hope that makes sense. If I had made a mistake of, oh, then I want up to index 2, so let me do 0 to index 2. That will give me just 0 and 1 because 2 is excluded. So the very thing that you see here is always excluded. The index that you see there is always excluded. Always excluded. So now let's go ahead and build a program that creates a username. Okay, so create, or maybe I'll use username underscore gen. Username underscore gen.qi. So we want to create a program that's okay. By now, this line makes sense to each and every one of you. I'm just putting it there so that I can easily execute the file. Otherwise, it's not necessary. Okay, so this program, what do we intend the program to do? We want it to generate user names from first name and surname. So the first thing we want is to take the person's first name. What is your first name? We call on the input function to ask the person to give us their first name. First name. So we can do this, say first name. Okay, then surname. Surname is equal to inputs. What's your surname? Great. Once we have gotten these, what we intend to do, we want to slice the first 3 characters of the person's surname and the 3 characters of. Okay, so let me just write it here. Let's write it here. We have, say, username is equal to, remember that this is a comment because of the hash that I put there. So username should be equal to first three characters, or let me just say 3 F name. Please understand that means 3 characters, first 3 characters of F name, plus they will pass an underscore there, then plus the surname. Okay, basically that's how we want to implement it. So let's see how we are going to get the first 3 characters. So we'll go ahead and say our username is equal to, how do we get the first 3 characters of our first name? We do that using slicing. So we slash it with 0. We set the first 3. So that should be index 0, index 1, index 2. That should be ending at 3. Okay, because we say from 0 just before you get to 3. That's how, personally, that's how I read it. So it makes it easy for me. Just before you get to index 3. So index 3 is not part. Okay, then this is a string that we are generating. So let's concatenate the underscore to it. Then we'll concatenate the first 3 surname. The first 3 characters of the surname. So that will also be 0 to 3. Okay. Once we have this, we can go ahead and say print, then we'll print your username. Your username is, then let me use another print statement. Okay. Let me not use another print statement. First username here. Since it will give me a space, let me close that. Yes. Then make this file executable. Mode plus X. The name of the file is username. All right, now we can execute this file. Username. And it says, what's the first name? My first name is Obed. What's my surname? My surname is Ehoneah. Your username is Obed underscore Ehoneah. I mean the first three, okay? So that is what we can do with slicing. And not just the beginning, we can slice any part of it. Middle, like any angle at all, provided you know the index of that. And you can equally use what the negative indexing as well. You can use the negative indexing as well. I think the time is fast spent, so what I'll do now is let me take questions from here. Then I'll reserve the string formatting, which is a very broad thing, so many parts. So probably Saturday. So let me pause here and take questions. Questions from you on what we have done so far. Do you have any questions? Thanks. All right, so if there are no questions, then I think we have done justice to, well, even though we couldn't do the string formatting, which is also a very broad one, look at it, go well on Saturday. So just keep an eye on the Telegram group. I'll put the information concerning the time and everything. I have to check and get back to you on that. So if there are no questions, then I would want to bring the session to an end here. Thank you all so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I hope that you learned something today. And hopefully when we meet again, we'll learn another thing. Thank you and see you some other time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you, Albert.
Thanks a lot.